Hi, I'm Christy Nelson, and I'm with the Summit Historical Society. We teamed up with two other organizations, History Colorado, which is our state historical society, and the Summit Foundation, to provide this program to all fourth graders. The name of our program is Moving Day, Colorado's Migration Story. What does migration mean? Well, it simply means to move. A few weeks ago, I had a big flock of Canadian geese, you know, the ones that fly in the V, land in the field behind my house. I thought, wow, this is great. They were only there 2 days, and then they were gone. They were migrating. They were moving to a warmer climate. That's what migration is. This program is going to talk about the migration of 6 different groups of people. And we're going to use a timeline and another tool, our map, to help us understand where and when these people lived here. So let's take a look first at the timeline. I bet some of you have already used timelines before. Timelines tell us when events took place. We read a timeline starting in the far left. This is the oldest date on our timeline, and moving to the right, and our timeline ends with present day. Now you are going to find that in your materials, you're going to have a timeline that looks like mine. And we'll talk more about that later. Now, you can tell that this is talking about 6 different groups of people because we have 6 different colored bars. Each bar represents a group of people. I want you to notice they didn't all live in Colorado at the same time. So we'll come back to our timeline every time we talk about a different people group. Now we want to go, remember, timelines tell us when the people lived here. Now we're going to go over and look at the map because it's going to tell us where they lived. So we just talked about the timeline, which tells us when things happened and when people were living in Colorado. And now we're going to look at another tool, the map of Colorado, that tells us where things happened. But before we look at our map, I'd like you to take out your workbook. Be sure you put your name on the front of it, and then go to the very back pages of the workbook. And in there, you're going to find a Colorado map that looks very similar to the map that we're going to look at. I want you to keep that map out. I'm going to have you follow along on the map as I talk about our big map. But I also want you to take out the small sticker that is the sticker of Summit County. Now, we're not going to use it right away, but I want you to put it aside. And when we get to talking about Summit County, we're going to put it on your map. All right, so let's take a look at our map. We're going to talk about some features of the map. Some of them are natural features. Others are man-made features. The first one we'll talk about is actually a man-made feature. It's one that most maps have. If you will look at your map and put your finger on the compass rose, if you pointed to this, you're absolutely right. The compass rose is on most maps. And what does it tell us? Well, it tells us direction. So the N refers to north. So we know if this direction is north, then this direction is south. And this direction is east, and this direction is west. So our compass rose has a unique look to it. Can anybody think, what does our compass rose look like? Well, if you said the Colorado flag, you're absolutely right. It's unique to this particular map because we're talking about Colorado. All right, let's take a look at some of the other features that we have on our map. Colorado is divided into 6 regions. We have the northern region, which of course is in the north. We have the southern part of Colorado. And then if we go over here to the east, this is sometimes referred to as the Eastern Plains or the Great Plains. Now, if we look over here on the western side of the map, we refer to this as the Western Slope. We have a unique feature here in Colorado, and that is the Four Corners area. Why do we call it Four Corners? It is the only place in the U.S. where 4 states come together right at the same spot. So we have Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, all join right here in what we call the Four Corners area. One more feature. When the plains come and meet up with the mountains, we call that area the Front Range. Now you'll notice that on the Front Range, we have several of our large cities: Fort Collins, Greeley, Denver, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Trinidad. They're all cities on the Front Range. Again, where the plains meet up with the mountains. Okay, well, speaking of mountains, there is a feature in the globe called the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide actually runs all the way through North America and down into South America, but it comes right through our state of Colorado. What does Continental Divide mean? Well, another word for it is a watershed. So what it means is that water that's flowing on one side of the divide is flowing east towards the Atlantic Ocean, and also the Gulf of Mexico. And then the other side, flowing westward, is flowing to the Pacific Ocean. So it basically divides the flow of rivers. Now, let's see if we can walk the Continental Divide. I want you to take your finger and I want you to put it way up in the mountains in the northern section by Wyoming. That's where the Continental Divide comes into Colorado. And I want you to take your finger and we're following it down. Look, it's going right around Summit County, but very close. And then down, and we get over here and, oops, which way do we go? We can either go to these mountains or we can go to these mountains, which brings up a very important point. Not every mountain is on the Continental Divide. Here in Summit County, 10 Mile Range is a mountain, but it's not on the Continental Divide. So in this case, right here at this valley, the Continental Divide makes a turn and comes way over here towards Durango and then out of the state. So that's our Continental Divide. Now, you may have noticed as we followed the divide that there are 4 major mountain river valleys. 3 of them we call parks, and 1 of them is very large and we call it a valley. So take your finger, and I'd like you to put your finger on the green area, which represents a valley, that is called North Park. I bet you put your finger way up here, and you'd be right. North Park is in the very northern part of our state. And then we come to another valley called Middle Park. Middle Park is very close to Summit County. Part of our county is actually in Middle Park. Now, as we continue south, what do you think the name of this valley is? I bet many of you in Summit County have gone over to Fairplay or Buena Vista, and you've been in South Park. And then as we continue on, this big valley in the south, we don't call a park, but it's called San Luis Valley. Now, out of these different valleys come 5 major rivers that flow. They start in Colorado and they flow out of Colorado. Colorado is only one of 2 states where no rivers flow into the state. They all flow out of the state. The other state that doesn't have any rivers flowing into it happens to be the islands of Hawaii. Those all flow into the ocean. All right, let's take a look at these rivers. We'll start out here with a river that starts in the South Park area, and it travels east. So it's east of the Continental Divide, and it's going through Denver and up and out through Nebraska. It's called the South Platte River. Okay? We also have another river that flows east. So it's east of our Continental Divide, and that's this river called the Arkansas River. One more east-flowing river is the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande starts here in Colorado and heads down to New Mexico and beyond, down to the Gulf of Mexico. So those are the 3 rivers that start in Colorado and flow east. But we have 2 more rivers that actually start west of the Continental Divide and flow west. The first one is the Colorado River. And you'll notice it starts way up in Rocky Mountain National Park. That's where the headwaters or the start of the rivers begins, and it flows down to the west. We have another river, the Gunnison River, that also flows to the west. Now, what happens right here in the town of Grand Junction? Well, the 2 rivers meet. What do you think the word junction means? It means when 2 things meet, and in this case, it's 2 rivers come together, and thus they called the town Grand Junction. Okay, so there are a few more features that I want to talk about, but first, let's get out your Summit County sticker. I'd like you to place it on our map. Now, remember that we are west of Denver, so if you come to Summit County and you're going through the Eisenhower Tunnel, you're actually coming into Summit County in the tunnel, and you're on the border of the Continental Divide. So we're going to place Summit County. Part of it's going to be in the Middle Park and west of Denver. Go ahead and put your sticker right there. Now, 2 more things I want to talk about, and that is the broken brown lines that you see here coming from the east, moving this direction, are what we call trails. Now, these trails were first formed by animals that were migrating, remember moving, into the area. A couple of those trails actually followed major rivers like the Arkansas and the South Platte. Why would the animals choose to be around the water? Duh, they need to drink water. Then came the Native Americans, and they used the animal trails, and they were looking for food and water. So animals were there, the water was there, and so these became very popular trails. And then the settlers used them. Today, some of our major highways actually follow those original trails. One more feature I want to talk about, and that is this line with the hatch marks that runs all the way down through the Front Range. That is a symbol for railroads. Now, we had some major railroads that came in and helped to bring settlers into our state. These are not the only railroads, though. In fact, right here in Summit County, we had 2 railroads that came into our county at one time. So the railroads would bring supplies and would bring people into our area. Now, remember, the map tells us where people are going to live. We want to look at some artifacts that are going to tell us more about the people that came here. In our sessions, not only are we going to talk about the timeline and the map, but we're going to look at artifacts of the different people groups. I have 6 different artifact boxes. Today, I brought the artifact box that is my artifact box. But first, before I show you what's in my box, we need to know what is an artifact. If you said an artifact is something old, well, you'd be like most people. But that isn't actually what an artifact is. An artifact is made by people, it's used by people, and it tells us things about the people that used it. So they're objects that give us clues about the people who used the artifact. Now, some artifacts, of course, are old. Like the desk that I'm using today is an old artifact of a schoolroom. But that doesn't mean that all artifacts are old. Let's take a look at this. This is my cell phone. Is it an artifact? Well, let's answer the questions. Is it made by people? Yes. Is it used by people? Yes. And does it tell you something about people? Well, if you were to get into my phone and look at my photographs and the places that I like to look at on YouTube or in Facebook or Instagram, you would find out a lot about me. So is this an artifact? The answer is yes, even though it's a new item. I just bought this phone. So artifacts are objects that help us understand people. And our boxes are going to have 3 artifacts in each box that will help us understand the people group that we're looking at. Come back next time, and we are going to be talking about the ancestral Puebloans.